our last video, we looked at how the 5060 Ti handled 4K gaming, which it was never intended to do. Today, we're dropping the resolution down to 1440p with the same goal of getting 60 FPS gaming experience or thereabout. As we did before, we're going to start by using DLSS in quality or balanced modes to get performance back before we decide to lower any settings. For 1440p, we won't be using FrameGen, but that always remains an option for gamers who aren't bothered by the lag and the visual issues. Our test system is the small form factor test bench, which is a 13900K with a 360mm AIO, 64 gigs of RAM, on an XTIA XProto-L open frame case. Our test GPU is the Zotac Gaming GeForce RTX 5060Ti 16GB twin edge model. We recommended it for small form factor enthusiasts looking to buy a 5060 Ti GPU. Zotac provided us the card for review and for testing purposes. Starting out with Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is an Unreal Engine 5 game. At 1440p with max settings and DLSS set to balanced mode, the game was hitting a fairly stable 60 FPS with some drops in combat. As it's a turn-based combat game, the drops are harder to notice than if you were in an action-style game, and probably won't affect your gameplay. Let's see how the 5060 Ti handles Crysis Remastered at 1440p. Maxing out all the settings with DLSS set to quality mode, the 5060 Ti was able to push frame rates into the 70s with occasional dips into the 60s, providing a very good gaming experience. Can it run Crysis at 1440p? The answer is yes, with a little help from DLSS. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077. Getting to 60 FPS at native 1440p resolution using the Ultra preset is easily achievable. Performance was solid with just a few dips under 60 FPS, and can be cleaned up by using DLSS quality mode, which pushes frame rates into the 70s and 80s. This was my preferred way to play on the 5060 Ti. Switching on ray tracing at the Ultra Ray Tracing preset, the 5060 Ti needed DLSS set to performance mode in order to get a consistent 60 FPS. Balanced mode provided 40 to 50 FPS, and if you're okay with those frame rates and have a variable refresh rate monitor, it should be a good experience. Up next is Dirt 5, and the 5060 Ti played the game extremely well. At native 1440p resolution, the game ran well over 60 FPS with max settings and ray tracing turned on. However, for those looking for a true 120 FPS experience, you will have to lower the resolution or drop some settings. Doom Eternal is up next, and the id Tech engine continues to prove its efficiency. At 1440p with max settings and ray tracing, the 5060 Ti was able to perform at a high refresh rate experience. Frame rates were well above 120 FPS and often in the 160 FPS range, if not higher. Dragon Age Veilguard is up next, and the 5060 Ti was able to hit 60 FPS with a few drops below at 1440p with DLSS in quality mode on the Ultra preset, with ray tracing set to selective. This also includes textures at the highest level, which is above Ultra. F1 2024 is our next contestant, and I ran into an odd issue with the frame rate counter not displaying properly. However, I can tell you that at 1440p with DLSS in quality mode, max settings, ray tracing on, the game ran at a locked 60 FPS and was a great experience. Another popular racing game is Forza Horizon 5. The game continues to shine on the 5060 Ti at 1440p with max settings including ray tracing on the extreme setting. Frame rates were typically in the high 80s, low 90s, which would look fantastic on a 120Hz or better display so long as you're using VRR. Grounded is up next and proves to be an easy game for the 5060 Ti to run at well above 60 FPS at 1440p. At max settings, the 5060 Ti was typically pushing around 100 FPS, albeit with the occasional Unreal Engine 4 stutter, as shaders compile on the fly. Guardians of the Galaxy proved to be a little trickier to run at 1440p than I initially expected. Open areas saw drops in performance requiring DLSS quality mode to be used to get a solid 60 FPS. However, the game looked excellent and ran with max settings and ray tracing turned on. Moving away from guarding the galaxy and into spreading managed democracy, Helldivers 2 was able to run at 1440p native resolution at max settings with the frame rates in the high 60s and low 70s. I would expect some drops under 60 with some of the larger explosions and larger hordes that you're going to have to fight, but overall it looked and ran very well. Immortals of Avium is our next Unreal Engine 5 game, and it's proving to be taxing at 1440p for the 5060 Ti. DLSS balanced mode was needed to make the game playable. However, getting a solid 60 FPS was still out of the question. Large cutscenes would drop into the high 30s and low 40s, while the game itself typically ran in the 40s to 50s in combat. Unfortunately, the 5060 Ti is going to have to drop settings or resolution to make Immortals of Avium a 60 FPS experience. Again, I recommend the Digital Foundry Performance Guide for Immortals of Avium to help you get that 60 FPS experience. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle took a lot of experimentation to get the best results. For a solid 60 FPS 1440p experience, you'll need DLSS set to quality mode and ray tracing turned off. All other settings though can be set to max. At these settings, I was able to lock the 60 FPS with VSync turned on. If you don't mind a 30 FPS console experience, 1440p with path tracing set to medium and DLSS quality mode was achievable. However, I noticed an odd stutter and what felt like a choppy frame pacing issue in cutscenes. The game itself played okay, but I wouldn't recommend it over the 60 FPS settings I previously mentioned. Pacer is up next, and the 5060 Ti didn't have any issues running it in 4K when we tested, and 1440p was no different. On the 5060 Ti, achieving 120 FPS experience at native 1440p and max settings is a perfectly viable way to play the game. It looks good, runs good, and will play well. Next up, and really just for the fun of it, is Quake 2 RTX. At max settings, the completely path-traced version of this 1997 game presented well on the 5060 Ti at 1440p, though it was not locked to 60 FPS. There were dips in areas with more lights, though they weren't too noticeable during gameplay. If anything, having a few frame rate dips that cause a little bit of stutter will bring you back to the 1990s. Heading back to the mean streets of 1980s Detroit, RoboCop at 1440p on the 5060 Ti looked and played well. I used DLSS quality mode with epic settings and lumen reflections, which made the game look excellent. Gameplay was typically 60 FPS or faster, but cutscenes would drop into the 50s or even the 40s. Overall, though, the experience was very good, very playable, and enjoyable. Switching to something a bit more relaxing is Satisfactory. A solid 60 FPS experience was completely playable at 1440p with max settings. As usual though, with Satisfactory, some of the larger factories may cause dips below 60 as you progress in the game. Next is The Ascent, which is another Unreal Engine game. The 3/4 view twin-stick shooter was easily able to achieve 60 FPS at 1440p with max settings, ray tracing on, and in DLSS quality mode. Overall, it looked very good and played very well. Finally, we have Valheim. The retro-style voxel art survival game looks and plays excellent at 1440p on the 5060 Ti. At max settings, I saw 70 to 80 FPS in most areas, with the occasional dips into the 60s on some of the heaviest areas. So how is the 1440p experience on the RTX 5060 Ti? The experience isn't bad, and if this is your GPU and you must play on a 1440p monitor, you won't have a bad time. At least for now. That said, at 1440p, the 5060 Ti relies on DLSS a bit too much for performance for a brand new 60 Ti class GPU. Performance is a bit lower than the RTX 3080, which was released nearly 5 years ago in September of 2020. While this may sound good in our currently stagnated market, it's actually why many gamers are disappointed with the 5060 Ti performance. Historically speaking, the RTX 2060 and 2060 Super arrived 5 years after the GTX 980 and were roughly 50% faster than the previous flagship. In order to match the performance gain from the 980 to the 2060, we would have to see the 5060 Ti beat the 3080 by 50%, and that isn't happening. Sadly, it seems the days of rapid GPU performance increases are behind us, as we are caught in an unfortunate combination of price inflation and performance and process stagnation. This is the hand we've been dealt, and we're going to have to make the best of it. While we do recommend the Zotac twin-edge model if you're in the market for a 5060 Ti, the 5060 Ti chip itself relies too heavily on upscaling and AI frame generation for its performance gains to earn our endorsement for 1440p gaming, and doesn't provide a strong enough uplift in traditional rendering performance. As such, 1440p gamers should probably consider going up a level of performance to the RTX 5070 and AMD RX 9070 class GPUs if they can afford to do so, and if they can find one at MSRP, which we all know probably won't happen right now. Well, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We at Small Form Factor Network are always appreciative of our viewers and our forum members and Discord members. Please feel free to visit us at our website, smallformfactor.net, and join in the conversation even if you don't have a small form factor computer.